the 4th, 2021. For roll call, Chair Simpson here, Vice Chair Kai.
Here.
Commissioner Bantz.
Here.
Commissioner Giles.
Here.
All right. And everybody else on the line is going to teach us something tonight. So,
Well,
Erica, you're up first.
thanks. We hope to teach you at least, or maybe enlighten some folks on the commission. So tonight, this evening, I have Martin Glasser Van Loon on the line from Sarah, and then Anna Ismate from 3J. And they are joining us this evening. We're going to talk about the possibility of a comprehensive plan map and a 2-map system for Sherwood and what that would look like. And so I just have a short presentation, and then we really just want to hear, your questions and thoughts. So let me share my screen. Hold on one second. There we are. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sometimes I get lost because when I have the screen up, I can't see anything else.
Erica, you're not really in presentation mode though. I don't know if that's intentional or.
Let me.
This is not PowerPoint though, so you may not.
Okay. That's
yeah, there you
better.
go. Okay.
That's
all right.
better.
Yeah, it's just because I don't have PowerPoint on this computer, it's all kind of messed up. But anyway, so tonight's purpose. For tonight, we want to answer your questions about a 2-map land use framework for the city of Sherwood, kind of what that would look like, and how we would implement it in the future. And then we would like to hear your feedback on the exploration of this 2-map system, if we even should move forward with it, or not, basically. So I'm going to start off here with a little planning 101. So what is a comprehensive plan map? A comprehensive plan map is really about the future. It depicts a long-term vision for the city and how it will grow over a 20-year period. And the map shows broad land use categories, often referred to as designations. And you'll see them color-coded on comprehensive plan maps for residential, commercial, industrial, parks and open space. And there's other designations that other cities and towns have on their comprehensive plan map, but those are kind of the main ones. So what is a zoning map? So a zoning map is the map that's divided into zoning districts. The zoning map can also show overlays, and each zoning district has a code section in the development code, because that's how the zoning map is implemented. So if you go to the Sherwood Zoning Map, which I'll bring up here in a minute, and if you go to low density residential, if you're in that zone, you would flip open our development code book and go to our commercial zones, our residential zones, and find the low density zone criteria, and that would specify, the lot size, the building height, the setback provisions, and whatnot. So the zoning map really tells you the specifics of what happens in a zone, how development looks and occurs. So Sherwood. So Sherwood, we have what we call a 1-map system, where our map here is actually both our comprehensive plan map and our zoning map. So what is a 2-map system? So a 2-map system is comprised of a comprehensive plan map and then a separate associated zoning map. And there are many cities throughout Oregon that use a 2-map system, and there are many cities in Oregon that use the 1-map system. The comp plan map is really what, I don't know, I guess you could call it the leader map, and the zoning map is the follower map. And that's because the comp plan map is, the vision, and then the zoning map, implements that vision. So I know that we've kind of have talked about this before, with the commission, and the commission asked for, well, what does this look like? What does the 2-map system look like? So I just pulled up just randomly. This is just Sandy, Oregon. We're taking a drive up the mountain here. So they have a 2-map system, and this is their comprehensive plan map. And I am actually going to flip it to their zoning map, because this is when you see the difference between the comp plan map and the zoning map. So I'm going to flip it to their zoning map. And you see how it's not exactly filled out all the way like their comprehensive plan map was. There's less color. Yes. Do people see that difference?
But not only that, but it looks like some of their zoning is different. Like, why would you have a comprehensive plan zoning that's different than what you already have built?
I'll get to that question. That's
okay.
That's a great question.
Yeah. All right.
So their comprehensive plan map actually they have comp plan designated, areas, they're growth areas. So that's why you see more color on the comprehensive plan map than you do the zoning map. But when you get to the zoning map, and I'm going to actually, let's go back to, this might help explain your question, Danielle, as we move forward here. So this map right here on your screen is kind of a draft comprehensive plan map that was, put together for the city of Sherwood. Right now, it kind of almost reflects our current map that we have. There's not a whole lot of difference, except for the fact that when we look at our residential districts, we have put some of them together. So I'm going to actually describe this in this next table. So on the comprehensive plan designation map that we have, on the left side of your screen is all the comprehensive plan designations that were on the map. We had public facilities, we had parks and open space, even though it wasn't shown. We have shown the riparian corridors, but parks and open space is definitely something we could put on the map. We have commercial, neighborhood commercial, commercial mixed use, employment areas, low density residential, medium density, high density, and then the future urban area, which is actually within the city's UGB. But then on the right side, we have our zoning districts, which actually implement the comprehensive plan designations, which is our long-term vision. So as you can see here, our commercial mixed use comprehensive plan designation is implemented by both the retail commercial and office commercial zones. Same with the employment area. So if we scroll back up here, let's take a look at this map again. That blue area that's shown in blue called employment area, those areas on the zoning map would be our light industrial, general industrial, and employment industrial areas. So for low density residential on the comp plan map, which is that yellow color, that is made up of our very low density residential and our low density residential zones. And then the medium density residential, which is a lighter brown color, is made up of the medium density residential and the medium density residential high. So as you can see on this table, how the zoning districts implement the comprehensive plan designation on this map. So implementation of a two map system. So I just kind of remember here that the comp plan map is the leader map, and it can be, pretty visionary or aspirational in nature. And when we implement a two map system, there are different ways to administer it. So if you have a two map system, I'm just going to provide an example here. So if a property owner proposes a zone change and the zoning category does not match the comprehensive plan designation, they will need to have an amendment to the comprehensive plan and to the zoning map. This sets like a pretty high bar for change. So for example, I just want to go back. I know this is probably confusing. I just want to go back to here, this little table here. So for example, let's see here. If somebody was zoned low density residential and they wanted to be zoned high density residential, there would be it's a pretty high bar to go through that process, because in a two map system, you would also need to change the comprehensive plan map designation, which is ultimately your long-term vision for the city.
Erica, and you may be getting to this, but it also allows, like you said, it allows you to be visionary. So if, for example, you're doing a plan or a replan for an area, you can at the comprehensive plan level have something that's where we want to be that isn't the same as what's on the ground right now. And then when that property owner, if that property owner wants to come into alignment with the comprehensive plan, it's easier for them to do that versus right now. It's sort of like it's one of the reasons why we have some sort of odd little areas around town that are maybe not how we would have designated them had we had a two map system when we put our comprehensive plan together originally.
Yes, that's perfect, Julia. Thanks.
I don't think you can see Commissioner Kai has his hand raised.
Oh, Commissioner Kai.
Erica, so if there's a two map system, the process or the ability to change zoning for property owner is significantly harder than it is now, correct?
So it could be if somebody wanted to change a zoning designation that didn't fit with the comprehensive plan designation.
Okay. And then
so for example,
Can you go back to that other slide?
I can. This one?
Yep.
Perfect.
If you wanted to go from medium density low to medium density high, your statement was that would be an easy for someone to just go ahead and increase their density.
It could be easy. However, it's still going to be a review process through the Planning Commission, and we will have, zoning change criteria that folks will have to meet.
And then with the two map system, you had said going from, say, low density residential to high density would be difficult. Would it be easier if they went from low density to medium density?
They would still have to show
The need for it?
a need.
Okay.
And then, you as the commissioner, I just want to always say, you as commissioners with zone changes, it's, pretty discretionary.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to point out that, and I correct me if I'm wrong, Erica and team, this list is kind of our recommended list, kind of based on what we have now and what we think is the appetite of the Planning Commission and Council and community. You could make it more, the comprehensive plan designations smaller, so you have more things within the realm, within the zoning district that fits within the comprehensive plan. And again, keep in mind, like in the past, the Planning Commission has had requests for zone changes from residential, high density residential to commercial, or commercial to high density residential. And it is discretionary, but it is a high bar, but there's always that push and pull of what do we want in the zoning versus the comprehensive plan. And having a 2-map system, if done well, I think would say our comprehensive plan is really solid. We believe in this comprehensive plan. And so it's a little bit higher bar to change from comprehensive plan category, but they could potentially change a little bit easier within zoning category. That's at least the way I've understood that.
Yep, that is 100% correct.
And then Commissioner Bance has a question also.
Yeah, did you say that there's currently areas of Sherwood where our comprehensive plan zoning differs from that of the underlying zoning that's currently there? That's already the case?
No.
I was saying that there are some areas where, so for example, just an example, there's some industrial property off of Sunset, and it was probably zoned industrial because it was an industrial use when the comprehensive plan was put together. And so it's a 1-map system. And so the comprehensive plan and zone matched the use that was there. And perhaps, and again, I'm not saying that we're proposing to change the comprehensive plan designation for that area, but perhaps if you weren't constrained by a 1-map system, then your choices of what that comprehensive plan designation would be may differ from what is actually on the ground. But right now, all of our zoning matches all of our comprehensive plan designations.
Okay. So it's typically more applicable for where you have vacant land that's zoned but not built out yet.
Now, I have a good example, Julia, that might also, so there's property that's zoned industrial across Oregon Street. And if we went to a 2-map system, it would still be, it would be, the second map would show that it may be a desire that that property be rezoned in institutional public, or it could be rezoned residential. And because it's zoned industrial now in our 1-map system, you'd have to go through a zone change to prove it, versus if we envision Oregon Street being a residential access to Old Town and having our government facilities on Oregon Street, when time comes for an application to come in, it would be easy to have the zone change correspond with that. But in other examples, you're creating a non-conforming use, where if you vision this to be a residential or institutional public government facility and there's already a industrial use on it, you're now creating a non-conforming use, and you're potentially affecting property values by just creating a second map, correct?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what we saw with the Sandy map. It looked like there's some zoning that's different.
So a 2-map system kind of just lets us have essentially a draft version of the map, kind of like, just as you guys said, aspirational, or in terms of what we want it to be, right?
Yeah, I think it gives you a little bit more flexibility to designate what you want it to be versus what is, without having the issue of, like Chair Simpson said, the non-conforming issue. I mean, you still have a little bit of issue where people are like, hey, that's not what I am. I don't want to be comprehensive plan that way, but it's less of an issue because they're still zoned the appropriate zone. And until they initiate the zone change, then they're still zoned that way.
Right. Right.
Why would you put something on an approved comprehensive plan zoning and then not rezone something that's already zoned that's out of conformance? Like in the example on Oregon Street, this bare land. Why would you put a comprehensive plan in place that changes that zone and then just leave the zoning there? And why not do them simultaneously the same? Because otherwise you run the risk of somebody could come in and apply to build something with current zoning. It's out of conformance with comprehensive plan. It seems like you just do them both together.
Because if I'm the landowner of that industrial land and you're now telling me that it's going to be a park, you've just taken, you have a takings, and the city will be at jeopardy for paying me the difference between my industrial land and the park that the city envisions it to be.
Got it. Okay.
No, these are all great questions. So the second bullet here, we already touched on, and that, zoning amendments can be easier if the zone category matches the comp plan designation. So, we are really not, we are in the process of updating our comprehensive plan and going through the adoption process this fall. By no means will we be implementing a two map system at this time. But when another thing I want to touch on here, another theme is that when Sherwood West when it's brought into the UGB, the city then at that time, we can create a comprehensive plan map for the area. And then when properties begin to annex, zoning would be applied that matches the comp plan map. And then we would, focus on that annexation criteria, focusing on, that zoning district and any goals and policies that are related to that site. So it just kind of sets the stage for how the comp plan map and zoning map could be set up in Sherwood West moving into the future.
So question on that, a one map system does not preclude for us from doing that. If we have a one map system and we have a preliminary plan for that area, we in essence have a two map system for our future growth areas.
That is correct, Jean. So you could definitely plan it as a one map, just like we have now. It wouldn't preclude that.
Right, because I just for clarity for new commissioners, the way Brookman Road came in was there was a master plan area, or even the Elward and Edie area. There was a master plan that went through the process, and that was zoned as part of the process being brought into the UGB and then being brought into the city limits. And so it wasn't like it was a surprise what the zoning was going to be. As soon as it was annexed, the plan that was in place at the time of annexation designated what the zoning was going to be. So it does not require a two map system to incorporate Sherwood West.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Yeah, just to clarify, that's state law as far as I understand it. You need to master plan it and have those codes changes ready before it can be annexed.
Right, and so that master planning could also, you have to master plan it and you have to add it to your second map, or we just master plan it and it's sitting out there when it becomes annexed. Either way, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I'll just add though that I think that, again, the idea, and I don't know how many of you guys remember my Josie slide where things were fuzzy and got clearer and clearer from years and years ago. But the idea is that even at the master plan stage, you might not know everything yet. So as you bring it in and comprehensive plan and then go through the process of kind of identifying how it's going to be developed and zoned, you might be able to define that a little bit more and then apply the zoning that's most appropriate within that comprehensive plan category. So it could just give you a little bit more flexibility to refine things as you move forward.
And Commissioner Giles has a question.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering, is there a sense as to which ones of these systems are easier to understand by the general public? Right, we're getting this course as to the advantages and disadvantages of both of these, and part of what I'm thinking about is that the average citizen or the person applying, if we have, is there a feeling for which modality is easier to understand from a layman's perspective?
So I think that the one map system is probably easier to understand.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. And I've worked for a jurisdiction that had a 2-map system, and I've worked for a jurisdiction that had a 1-map system. And there's pluses and minuses with both. I mean, certainly
Right.
a 1-map system is easy in one sense, but a 2-map system gives you a little bit more ability to plan without impacting existing properties.
Yeah, so that was going to be my feeling was that potentially the 2-plan system allows us to stimulate conversation better by saying, here's where we're going. And I know this is something that I'm sure the council gets all the time. Anybody want to talk about it, right? I mean, like when you're throwing it out there, you're opening it up for a lot of discussion, but frankly, it's also, it's what we, if you could see the two side by side and say, okay, well, here's my product, my property today, and here's where we're going to, I could stand up and have a discussion about that separately from what it is today, right? And so that's the only reason why, I mean, that's the advantage of, yes, it's simpler if you understand that, and frankly, I don't know if comprehensive plan map's the right term, but the desired, here's where we're headed map, and then here's where we are today. I could see that as being easier to comprehend as well, but all right, thanks. That answers my question.
So I have one question. Maybe it's at the end of the story that I should ask the question, but is there any reason why we are consolidating so much in the residential? My fear, and then is there a way that in the area that we have our existing developments, I guess my biggest angst is we can't quite comprehend how House Bill 2001 is going to impact our community at a residential level. And by doing an overlay district that says we don't care if you're medium density, you can do medium density low, medium density high, compounded with House Bill 2001, seems that there could be a doubling effect of increasing density, which I don't see that as the vision of most citizens in the city of Sherwood. And then my other concern in the employment area is twofold. One is that by having light industrial and general industrial, we have transition or buffer areas where if an industrial or employment area is abutting a residential zone, which it does on the east side of our community, you have an ability to put the less impactful development next to the residential. And the employment industrial is the high value land that we save for other areas that have more creative use, and we want them to be able to do more because we're going to reap a benefit. So I'm concerned that by consolidating so much into small areas, especially in our existing community, we might be creating harm when it's not intended, and keeping the zoning districts at the comprehensive land similar to what we have in our existing area, and in our future vision area, allowing them to be less specific, I guess would be the only way that I could be 100% on board with the two map system, is to how to ensure that we're not going to be creating density or losing the way we buffer by putting less dense both employment and commercial away from our residential areas. So.
No, that's great. So I just wanted to touch on the buffer issue between employment areas and residential areas. And that really should be a standard in the development code that's outlined when development occurs. So if you have, employment area that's developing next to a residential site, that's, a buffer is included.
But I think by the general tone of general industrial and what's allowed versus light industrial or employment industrial, the general uses that are permitted versus conditioned, by creating those zones going from less intense use to higher intense use, going further away from our residentials. Same with the commercial zones. We don't have general commercial, right next to single family detached. That's where we want to do buffer of retail commercial and office commercial or neighborhood commercial, and then go to the high intense major malls, with proper buffering. Mm-hmm. I guess that's just my...
Erica, there'll be some guidance either in the comprehensive plan or in the development code, I assume, that kind of identifies where the zoning is appropriate within the umbrella of these comprehensive plan designations, right? I mean, it's not like if you're in the employment area, you get to pick one of these three things.
Right.
There'll still have to be some logic and thought and discretion on what zoning is applied on any given property within a comprehensive plan employment area.
Doesn't seem very clear when you look at the map as presented, so.
Yeah, I was thinking this was more of a general planning tool, and the actual zoning map is what wins when it comes to people applying for something. Although you did say that having this could make it easier to switch or something like that. So I hear the concern, but as long as it's very clear this is kind of a roll up for visionary stuff, that generally this is employment zone here-ish. As we're kind of thinking about the broader plan for our city, and that the specific zoning needs to still get outlined, or it is outlined separately in a different document. I think that it's more okay. That also, I think doing it this way, I think would be harder. With a one map system, I think the map that I saw has very specific zonings kind of lined out. There's a lot of colors and shades of colors on that. And if we also add to the one map the roll up colors for all of these, it can just be a lot of legend going on too. But so I can see kind of both sides, but I do share that concern. As long as it's truly like a vision thing, that's worth considering.
Because if we go back to that parcel that's on Oregon Street, and I think I'm using it because it's owned by Washington County. Correct me if I'm wrong, Julia, that Washington County parcel is
light industrial.
Light industrial, but if it's all of a sudden blue and it becomes easy to become general industrial, it seems like we have done harm to the neighborhoods that are right next to it, because it should be, it should take into consideration what's next to it. So I'm concerned about taking so many fine-tuned zoning districts, especially within our very developed town area, and then just making a very general view. The general view looks great in our future development areas or our growth areas, and that seems to be like a transition area where we go from plan map to comprehensive plan to zoning. It seems like a growth area opportunity, but redeveloping in our existing it concerns me. So
I think your point partly is that we already have mechanisms to do that through comp plan stuff, and we can already kind of see the future.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's a mechanism for an individual lot, a lot to come in and ask for a zone change, but if we vision something to be a different zone, then we can't go tell the developer, a property owner out there on Oregon Street that, hey, we think your light industrial should be our next government facility and park, because then we now have a takings issue. So, you know, it's a it's a hard. I could argue both sides, but I get more nervous about making sure that we don't negatively impact what our residents are used to seeing, especially as House Bill 2001 comes in with a lot of unknown density impacts. So, thank you, Erica.
Yeah.
We're at questions and feedback.
Yeah, so I just wanted to re-emphasize, we're not recommending adopting a comp plan as part of the comprehensive plan update. This is just kind of an exercise to really gauge your feedback, and if this is something we should keep in our back pocket as we move forward with other planning projects in Sherwood. If you would like to develop this concept more, or if we should just let it be and just move forward with our one map system here in Sherwood.
Erica,
Let it be.
Is there a specific reason why we're not trying to move towards a two map system with the comprehensive plan work that's being done at the same time?
I think it would probably be easier to adopt the comprehensive plan and then move forward looking at implementing a two-map system, if that's how it was decided that, that's how we want to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I could envision that if you sent out a comprehensive plan update hearing notice with the language that we're putting forth in a brand new plan, and putting out a map that changes the color of a bunch of people's property, the hearing may lose focus a little bit.
It may, because I think there's going to be, I know that there would be a public outreach component to all this in the future, most definitely.
I don't know if there's capacity to have enough outreach on a new comprehensive plan and a map that would have that type of impact. I just don't see the hearing going well.
I think it would distract from the work that you as a commission have done for the last 2 years. That's fairly significant, and the map is essentially something that hasn't been included in the conversations thus far.
I do agree that getting the comprehensive plan work done without the distraction of trying to implement or make publicly known that we would be going to a two map system. Like, I understand the importance and the benefits of that. I do, however, think that a two map system would be incredibly helpful and beneficial in terms of planning and things like that. So me personally, I would like for us to have further discussions or investigations on actually making it happen, or at least seeing, from the full commission, if there's an interest in doing so, at least.
I think my statement would be that if we go to a two map system, that there be 2 columns of breakdown.
Definitely.
Existing development has a finer breakdown of residential, commercial, and industrial, and that if we envision a particular swath of land being changed, that we have a finer designation, and that in our growth areas we may even make them less distinguished: commercial, industrial, residential, and then have the ability to create the detail when it comes from comprehensive plan to zoning when it gets annexed.
I think if we talk more about this, maybe see, I don't know if it's possible to see markups of what Sherwood would look like under both maps versus one map, just based on what we have already approved for our plans and where things are at. And then we can kind of talk about, is that the kind of thing we'd want to see and what we'd want to do with it? Because a lot of this is really kind of hypothetical and we're kind of just visioning. So yeah, there's that. This is, did you say this is the 2 or the 1? I can't remember.
This is the second map that doesn't exist.
This would be the second map.
So can you have those printed in color to the same scale so that before we have our next conversation, the
Yes.
commissioners can have both in hand to scale so they can see how that looks?
Yes, for sure.
I feel like this is those children's games where you have two pictures that are next to each other and you're trying to pick out what's different from one to the next.
And Erica, we might be able to just note, I mean, the main difference, of course, is the collapsing of zoning districts into broader categories, but there are no, and Martin, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, there are no other changes here in this map that differ from the zoning map other than the collapsing of zoning districts into broader categories. Is that correct?
When we've looked at those future urban areas, those have been added. Yeah.
Right, okay.
And then I think maybe one of the things I liked about this map, irrespective of, two map system or not, is if you are to think in long-term planning, I like how we added the shaded hillsides and the topography on this map. Absolutely. Because as we've learned through the years working in Sherwood, it's such a characteristic of the town. So to have that readily available as you're making planning and policy decisions or considering them, I thought was real helpful. But again, that's irrespective of a two map system.
And in addition to topography, this map also highlights the riparian areas, which is not highlighted in the zoning map, but just, yet another small element that adds to the understanding of the area.
And that's really.
What was the word you just used that began with an R?
Riparian.
Oh, riparian areas.
What does that mean?
The creeks and the buffers around the creeks.
Okay, I just learned a new word today.
So, and that is really helpful because if you just looked at Sherwood West as a line dry, it doesn't give you perspective of how steep and hilly it is on the west and how much setback has to be allowed for the creeks that go through there. And when you're making decisions about putting in a housing development and then you pull this map up and look and go, oops, we have a creek and a steep slope. So that's really shouldn't be, we should take that into consideration when we make a decision. So this helps a lot.
This is kind of what I was saying earlier, kind of the roll up, kind of the super categories of zoning. As long as it doesn't conflict with underlying zoning of the existing area, I think that's one of the big concerns I saw earliest on looking at Sandy. I was immediately like, what the heck? Because I think that would get us into trouble, like you were just saying. So this is that I would like to look at this further, with kind of the one map version as well. I could think about it more. Because I do see benefits here, but yeah, like I was saying, if we tried to do this roll up for just the expansion parts attached to the one map existing zoning that's detailed right down to the zoning level, now you got like 40 different color things, and that I think that would be a lot. So I can see how this would be useful. I just need to kind of think through it. What is it does staff have a particular recommendation? I mean, is this, maybe I should just ask, why are we talking about this? Is this, you guys just thought, hey, that other cities do this kind of neat thing and I'd like our commission to think about it? Is there a thing you guys prefer that you're pitching this to us for a reason?
No. So I have no preference between the two map and the one map system. The reason why we're bringing this up, I think, is because we are going through the comprehensive plan process now and really providing like another option for the community to think about in the future, to be a little bit more visionary with our planning work.
So question, and I'm not going to pick on any one particular parcel, but if we were to revisit Highway 99, would we all envision it being a buffer of commercial all the way down Highway 99 instead of a piecemeal of what it is? Because like Erica said, there's some parcels that the zone map has a designation just because that's what it was when the last map was done. And so I think that's where, if we look at this 2-map system, we could envision something different in the community, but I don't know how well that would work. So.
And I don't have a strong preference, but I have a preference towards a 2-map system because I've seen the Planning Commission struggle over the years and frankly back and forth sometimes with people that want to change zoning, and they come in and they are showing how there's a need for this, and then they come back in and they show there's a need for that. And another example is through the planning of Area 59, which is the area around where the Ridges Schools is now. There was a little, in the planning process, a little pocket of commercial, and the developer came in and said, that doesn't make sense. We need it to be residential. And which is fine. I mean, I don't know that that was necessarily the wrong decision, but it just, having a 2-map system allows the commission and council to hold a little bit more firm to the vision, with maybe a little flexibility on what the zoning is, as opposed to just sort of like going with the winds of whatever developer makes an argument. Does that make sense?
Having been on those hearings, it makes a lot of sense. And it goes back to one of the zones, it makes sense to have commercial next to Highway 99, but a developer coming in and saying, your housing needs analysis says you need houses, so you should allow us to change from commercial to residential because we're not right on Highway 99. And so, of course, our housing needs analysis depicted a housing shortage, and it was reasonable and appropriate to change the zoning from commercial to residential. But if, would this map have changed that decision? I don't know if it would or not.
Does that fly in opposition, though, to the idea that we need to examine them individually based on topology and like, do we, it feels like it's kind of up to us to hear what the developers are saying and decide whether or not it's valid enough of a reason, like the stuff that we did on 12th and Sherwood, where it was like, well, this is the right land use for it because, anything else is too expensive to do, housing on or whatever, I can't remember what the other options were for it, but it was like, they showed the numbers and made the case that this needs to be this kind of a building. And I don't want to tie our hands in the future, but I get that we want to be consistent, but so if we're consistent with it, we don't have our hands tied. Like, we can't, we're not examining and saying, well, because frankly, they might be right. They're not right on 99. And for some reason we say that's okay, but it would be an intentional decision that would be an abnormal thing versus something that is kind of just grandfathered in or happens automatically or anything. Does that make sense?
But I think I guess I'd add, I think Julia mentioned this earlier. I think it's really important that we have to look holistically at the long-term vision for the whole area. And we don't want to be too reactive to specific changes that are requested by individual parcel owners. We really need to look at how does that change affect the long-term vision that we have in this plan.
Right, I get that, and I love that. I think that as long as we can still look at, because it is one of those things where, yeah, the 99% of the lots or the land, it's going to work with the vision as long as we can, as a commission, decide on exceptions. I feel comfortable with
Yeah,
that.
there still will have to be
I
a
think-
process for changing the comprehensive plan. I mean, that
Yeah,
will
I
be
think-
a given process.
I think the danger is, you're right, you want to retain enough flexibility to handle those 2% of cases where they need to be handled, but you don't want to open it up too much to where, we've seen this, right? Like developers and property owners can be very crafty and make really compelling arguments that kind of force your hand if you leave too many windows open.
Agreed. So is there any more feedback that you need from us versus I'd like to have, you've heard our input and our concerns and how, I think all of us are good arguers, so we could probably, any of us argue both sides of a 2-map or a 1-map system. But it would be nice to hear, before we go any further, the council's stomach for this 2-map system, because if the council's stomach says not while I'm in office, then we know not to pursue at this time.
Yes, I completely agree with Eugene. And so that was kind of our next step. We wanted to hear, planning commission's feedback, first, what the positives are, what the fears, could be from the community, implementing the system. And I think we have some great feedback tonight. And we'll be presenting to the council to learn from them as well.
Hopefully we gave you enough input to make a presentation so that you can get good input from the council on this.
I think so.
Would we ultimately decide or just recommend to council to do it? What's our
We would
here?
recommend to council.
Thanks.
Yeah. Council's elected, they get to be in the hot seat for making that final decision.
Yep.
Okay. Any last minute comments before we move on?
No, either
Well,
way, I still think we should add landform to our existing map, because that makes decision making easier when you're doing any type of visioning for the community. And thank you, Martin, for including that.
And I also want to thank Martin and Anais for their time this evening too, for
Yes.
joining.
You bet.
Of
Glad
course.
to do it.
Thank you.
Good
All
luck.
right. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Is it Joy's turn now? Poor Joy, she has to go last at every single meeting, doesn't it? Is that?
It's all right. Are you guys ready? And I can share my screen.
All right. Everybody ready for residential design standards?
Yay.
We haven't looked at this enough. I think we need to do about 7 more of these.
Awesome.
Yep, good.
All right. So you guys are seeing my screen. I'm just confirming that. And Erica, you might need to help in regards to if anyone has their hands up, because I unfortunately cannot see that.
Yes.
So good evening, everyone. Chair Simpson and Commissioners Joy Chang, Senior Planner, you guys all know that. So tonight we are presenting, or I'm presenting, the residential design standards since we've last met. Planning, since our last work session 2 weeks ago, we were discussing, we made changes tied to what the Planning Commission suggested, and also staff changes tied to the residential design standards. We're also going to be discussing additional comments on the latest proposed code amendment standards that you may have. And apologies to everyone that I know that the packets only went out yesterday, and so I'm not sure if you had enough time to look at all those amendments. And then finally answer questions tied to setbacks, just more clarification allowance for variances, and also clarification on public access way, which are typically public access easements, if we are going to require facade design elements too. So moving forward, in regards to the residential design standards, the overall intent of them is, for homes to look high quality and making sure that we maintain an overall small town feel of Sherwood. I know that that is one of the key elements in regards to why is it that we're trying to implement these design standards. And also considering what have we heard from the development community, from the open houses and also directly from one particular developer. They've identified it's too prescriptive and requested additional flexibility in regards to the design elements. And then you as a commission asked, can we be looking at these instead of number of elements? Can we do a percentage? So let's discuss that. So these are, the memo I sent out. It was really difficult for staff to determine, especially from this slide, you can see that there are some design elements that can be easily calculated, from 15% windows, covered porch, balconies, dormers, the list goes on. But there's also a lot of design elements that can't be calculated, which is unfortunate, just because there's no way for me to measure it out as far as like an area, like prime example, 4 color scheme, 4 different paints on a house. I'm not gonna, that's one element. I'm not gonna calculate every single house color, in regards to the area. So there's some that you can and some that you can't. So I wanted to just identify, this was what the original proposal identified were, 3 required standards plus 5 additional one, with 1 specifically from the porch, the roof, and the window element, and then another 3 from any of those 4A and 4B elements. So what I was stating earlier, that I did find this challenging due to certain design elements not being quantifiable as listed. It's also onerous for property owners or developers in calculating the percentage instead of choosing from allowed detailed design elements. And so with that, what staff proposed was keeping the 3 required standards. The first 3, the entry location requires the garage and off-street parking area, and the windows or entrance doors, the 15%. But in addition to those 3 things, adding 5 additional elements from a list that still consisted of the porch, the roof, windows, garage, and building materials. So we're still adding 8 design elements as identified in the previous slide. It's just easier where it is just a list. And I'll show you the residential design checklist that I've created as an example, so you can see exactly what would be required from a person submitting a residential building permit.
Joy,
And Jean has a question, Joy.
Yes.
So, having read the packet, I understand where you were going to go with this. As you were speaking it out loud just now, I figured out how to, because I understand what you're talking about. If you go to the previous slide, that explaining to the people at the open house how to get the 5 additional elements
Oh.
was
Yes, this.
was complicated. I figured out how to do it when you were saying that from your checklist. So in your residential design checklist, you have an entry location, and then they have 2 check marks that they have to answer. Yes, they have an entrance within 8 feet, and yes, they have one of these design elements. Then you could just put number 3 and then pick one of the detailed design elements from the list, and then have them write down in your checklist which one they picked. Did they pick 1A, 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the porches? Or in the window, they have to have 15%, and they have to have one of the items in C. So did they pick C 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? That way we still get the 3 design elements that we're trying to meet in element 4A. So we have the 3 required standards, and then on your checklist, they pick one of the detailed design elements, and then they get to use the list and pick 2 more. That way it's the best of both worlds. I still had concern that going from the 5 elements down to just checking any 5, that we were losing the point of this, which was to have porch details, roof details, and window details. So, but having been at the open house, I understand what the confusion is, but putting it on a checklist and just having them under each of the sections. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And we have a slide of the checklist coming up too.
Okay, so that's where I'm going with it.
It makes sense.
Oh, good.
All right. So let's continue on, and then we'll eventually get to the residential design checklist. So the elements that we basically listed, again, porches, roof elements, windows. We did we added some additional that were not previously there, like decorative eave braces, window grids, just elements that were suggested that we add so that they can meet, so that the developer can actually meet some of these elements. Again, garage elements as far as decorative doors, even a balcony, or in this case, it's like a pagoda aspect of it. Building materials, I know there was some concerns and tied to a modern farmhouse. So we did put vertical board and batting here so that that would be something that they would be able to meet, in addition to belly band.
I really like the garage additions. That looks, and the building, it looks a lot better.
Great. So then, talking about the checklist, design checklist, it's a 5-page form where it basically, we have, additions or conversion, if you can see it, if it's internal or external, or addition, can it be seen from the public right away? Yes, they need to complete this. No, they basically stop. They get a waiver. They're not obligated to execute this particular element of the building permitting process. Outside of, the typical requirements of who's actually applying, what's the address, and all the zoning aspect of it, there is a plot plan aspect of it in regards to setback, building height, landscape areas that will be part of that review. And then this is where we start talking about those elements that we were just discussing. And as Jean was suggesting, being able to possibly take what you originally proposed versus me just identifying an entire list, and doing a 3, with the additional entry, the garage and street and window. Then there are, other elements as far as building material prohibited. Do they meet the standards? Then the general requirements as far as limitation of parking. So as staff took the liberty of, identifying they have to have 5 elements, we basically listed, they have a whole list that they can choose from, and all of the highlighted yellow are all of the new ones that we've identified. And definitely this is a draft design checklist, so we can.
Oh, Joy, you're cutting out.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. She'll be back here in just a second.
So can I ask one question while we wait for Joy? Why do townhomes only have to have 2 elements?
The townhomes, we have a minimum of 2 elements because I believe in the townhome section, we have identified there's some standards in that section that already exist in our code.
I thought we were removing the townhome and just incorporating it into this one. So it seems like maybe we could. I don't want to take a lot of time, but it just seems like maybe we should reconsider. I think everything should have 5, or maybe fully understand why townhomes only need 2, because that doesn't seem fair.
She's back. Oh my gosh, my apologies. My internet is sporadic. Okay. What did I miss here? Let's see here.
So Joy, Jean had a question that townhomes they're only considered to have 2 elements.
Yeah, that was what was proposed, and it would be townhomes for each townhome. So it's not like for 6 of them. It would be each unit would have 2 elements on each one that would be required.
That's not clear there. So.
Oh, okay. Because, all right, we will definitely have to clarify that.
Can we even do that? I thought House Bill 2001 said you can have design standards that apply to all housing types. I didn't know we could differentiate and say, well, this type has to have these things. So cottage clusters, I know there was some distinction a little bit, which I don't know why, but I assume so.
So when we presented our proposal in regards to DLCD, we basically identified that we're treating everyone the same, where they would have to go through some design standard. We're not picking and choosing if it's a middle housing or not. All of residential development will have to go through some residential design element.
So I think that's clarification would be each townhome unit has 2, or it's be more clear that a townhome block, it has 5 elements, just like every other building. A 4-plex has to have 5 elements. A single family detached has 5 elements.
Right. Okay. No, we can definitely make that change. But yeah, I mean, we are supposed to treat all of our types of residential housing the same, and the blanket is everyone's going through residential design with some very specific to the type of housing, like cottage clusters, that aspect, because that is a totally different type of housing type that has very specific prescriptive requirements tied to.
Right. That one I can see. I wasn't sure how that was happening from the law standpoint, but it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, but that is a good catch, Jean, and also Commissioner, as in identifying it as a block would definitely fix it versus just us identifying why are we treating them differently. So thank you. So with that, then basically the last 2 pages talks about more housing plan variety. And this applies to new subdivisions and townhome developments, because that's typically when we would be able to capture it, that a developer can submit their housing plans early on so that they can possibly get a master approval for all of their 200 lot subdivision if it's coming to that. So that is housing plan variety standard. And then the very last page, I believe, is still that. And then, staff notes.
So just on the previous one, just a couple quick comments just for clarifying it. Under housing plan variety, it has to be any new subdivision and townhome development. And I would just restate it in one sentence. This standard does not apply to cottage clusters.
Oh, it does. It does not apply to cottage clusters.
I would remove the rest of it about single detached dwelling and townhomes, because you have now omitted triplex, quads, and duplexes, which I think the standard would apply. We wouldn't want 4 quadplexes identical right next to each other, because they need to be treated just like a townhome development or a single family detached. You wouldn't have two quads identical next to each other. They should have some building variation between the two. That's why my statement is this standard does not apply to cottage cluster, means that it applies to everything.
Okay, so remove the standard applies to new detached single dwelling and townhome developments only.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it, in my opinion, and I guess maybe the commission could weigh in on this, I believe it should apply to duplex, triplex, and quads, just like it does townhomes and single family. Commissioner Vance?
Oh yeah, that's right. My hand was up for something else, but I have a comment on that. So it basically applies to all 1 to 4 family type of stuff, because I don't think this applies to multifamily necessarily either.
No.
Right? So it's all one. It's a single family through quad, which is pretty much all that's allowed, right? Plus cottage clusters and multifamily. I can't think of anything else really. So maybe we specify that.
Townhomes can be 6, I think.
Okay.
In Sherwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just clarity there. But my question actually was, and this is probably a simple, easy question. It says pick 5 things, and I'm guessing that means pretty much any of these little square boxes. If they pick 5 of them, they qualify, right?
Yep.
Okay. And that's kind of in line with what I think we talked about last time, where it was kind of prescriptive right down to like, okay, from the garage, you must pick something from the garage stuff, and one of 3 of these things or whatever. And I think we kind of turn it into, okay, the overall facade has to have, just take your pick of a larger list. So that's consistent. I didn't I wasn't able to spend a ton of time reviewing this whole huge document revisions, but I didn't, just kind of glancing through it, didn't see how that change was in the big grid starting on page 54. So this aligns with that, I think. So that's good.
Sorry, Joy, I just want to clarify. So you are correct, Commissioner Vance, is that you pick any of the 5 of these checkmark boxes and you meet the residential detailed design elements. But I guess what I've heard from Chair Simpson this evening is to go back to kind of what we originally had, which would be more prescriptive. So I think as planning staff, we need to know which direction the commission wants to go in. Do we want to?
We never disagree.
And go back?
Ever.
So, yeah, so that's why we're here as far as, are the revised proposed satisfactory to move forward? If not, what changes, do you propose? And so when doing the analysis, trying to get to that 35% and trying not to be too prescriptive, it was the easiest way for staff to implement the design was, require the typical 4 that are on there.
3.
And then, or 3, sorry, require the typical 3, and then come from the list, require 5. And so tonight there is, the conversation, Chair Simpson identified that, there is still a way of us implementing the previous version that had the requirement that they needed to choose another element from those top 3 and then choose 2 from the entire list.
So let me jump in here real quick while I'm stopped. I agree with Chair Simpson. I think I only am one member of council, but I think the council was likely much more preferable to the previous method than the current one, and I'd hate to send it back to you.
Thank you.
If I remember right, it wasn't in totally this way, like just pick total 5. I think there was still, like you just mentioned, a first few that were you had to do these, but then we had de-prescriptioned some of it. So it wasn't quite as, because I remember we talked a lot about the garage thing, and then later on, it just seemed like, well, if we could just kind of allow overall flexibility in the front of the house, the garage could be part of that, or they can do like 5 other things on the front, and that'd be fine too. And that seemed more amenable. But yeah, there was still kind of a list of certain things that we also had to do. It seemed like that mitigated the getting a little bit too prescriptive.
What I think what will help is we'll revise the residential design checklist to what we originally had, and we'll send it out to you just to review, and you guys can just give us the thumbs up that this looks good.
Okay, so can I make a comment? So we have item 1 is in the checklist, starting on page 2, is entry location. And so when I go to the detailed design elements, number 1 is porches and entries, and those match perfectly. The next required element is a garage. So in our detailed design element, garage should be element 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I think instead of numbering them 1 A, B, C, D, E, it should be 1 porches in the design detail. 1 is porches, and then there's A, B, C, D.
Yep.
And then number 2 is garage elements, A, B, C, D, E. And then the third required element is windows, which is number 3. And then it becomes window is number 3, and then they can pick A, B, C, D, E. And so then in my opinion, the residential design checklist would have 3 sections: entries, garages, and windows. And the entry would have a number 3 underneath it that would say which design element, which detailed element did you select? Garage, which detail element did you select? Window, which detail element did you select? And then they have an option to choose 2 more elements if that becomes, and it may not be required that they need 2 more, but it would be, we just need to figure out if 2 more is asking for too much or if it's appropriate to ask for 2 more. I think it's we're only asking for 8 things still, maybe. So Commissioner Bance, you had a little bit more comment about just picking 5. Do you have hear your thought about
Well,
my.
the list of garage items on this changed actually from from what's in like page 55 of the packet.
Yeah.
It's things like natural wood finish, and I mean, there's stuff in there that I think we were a bit more down on, and so this list is different. But I think we're going here satisfies a little bit, especially when you go up. The last page we're looking at, there's already some line items that are like, you have to do this, you have to do this, certain elevations, setbacks, and then pick something from these. I think I'm probably more amenable to having, once you have certain things that we definitely want prescribed, more flexibility down here. But I get, and if council's going to say no, then we will get more specific, and so we'll do.
And we may be able to show them two options, and then if we give them two drafts to say this is one and this is the other, and the pros and cons. This one's prescriptive. This one's flexible. And then the council in their next work session just kicks it back and says, pursue this one or pursue that one. And then we're not going to be sending up something that they're not going to like. Commissioner,
Great idea.
Thank you. Commissioner Giles, Commissioner Kai, do you have any questions, answers, comments on this?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that I wasn't sure what the councilman's specific objections were to this version of it, because I also am, hey, if we're saying that these, variables are essentially equal in our minds for adding variety and making them look nice and all the others, then do I really care which one of them they choose together? Because remember, their incentive is also to sell them for the the most that they can get, and so they're incentivized to put them in and also make it look nice together. So I don't know, Councilman Scott, do you have any specific objections to this one versus the previous one, or is it just in general you liked how the other one was set up more?
Yeah, so in full disclosure, I'm not looking at the presentation because I'm driving.
Oh, right.
So I can only comment generally that there's definitely a feeling by what I would think is a majority of council is that we want to be very sure that we're going to get an outcome that is matching what our community expects and wants to see. And so I think there's a concern that if we're too wide open, that, we could end up with results that aren't what people are looking for. So I like Gene's idea of sending both and letting us see it a little bit more, in detail and making a call.
So, and I know that it's a lot of work to do this and to do two and stuff like that, but even if we do this, so let's say we were to do the one that had more flexibility, and we're to find in a year that, well, we're getting, garbage or whatever, can't we redo it?
I'd rather go the other way. I'd rather say.
I was going to say the same thing. It's better to be too restrictive and be able to loosen it than the other way around, because then the garbage is there for 50 years.
Okay, so my only pushback on that, and just know that this is coming from a total layman's perspective here, is that if we're too restrictive, are we going to end up with the same looking house all over the place? Because we've said you have to have these 5 things no matter what. You know what I mean? Like, and all of a sudden we are impacting design in a negative way because everybody is going to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think it's if the 5 things we're talking about are, the entry location and porch, and how much window coverage, and how much does the garage dominate the frontage. Those aren't like you have to use a belly band or you have to have this style versus that style of architecture, right? Like I think those kinds of prescriptive elements I would totally agree with you on. 15% or 20% or whatever the right percentage of window coverings can look very different, from house to house to house. So I get what you're saying. I think we just have to get the right things that we're requiring so that they're not too prescriptive in look, right? Like conceptually, it looks good. It doesn't necessarily look the same. If we're getting into the items that would make it look the same, then I totally agree with you.
Okay.
I think we also have an opportunity to add more elements if we find that we're missing a garage element, because I think Joy's picture had that little doodad on the top, but I didn't see the word doodad in the garage option because it says balcony, but I think used the word pergola in the picture. So we may be able to add more design elements that make it more creative. But I think when I was doing this, I was able to select 5 elements that every house is probably going to have anyway. And I didn't address any of the enhancements in an entry. I didn't address any garage elements. And it seems like I could pretty inexpensively miss 2 of the key elements that we've been trying to make sure are enhanced and what our community has said to us. And that's what I'm going back to is the community online survey said these were important elements to them, which is why they've been important in the process, which is garages not being primary, porches being distinctive, and windows being a primary element that is got good coverage. Those came out of that online survey really loud and clear. So anyway, that was my comment.
Yeah, I'll also say when it comes to garages is that, if we don't have something that absolutely requires a garage to be 50 or 60% or less of the frontage, I guarantee you the council will send that back. Like that is a must-have for this council. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we got that as number 1 on the garages. Number 2, sorry, but it's a requirement. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I was remembering more what we were a little bit of the concern last time, where we had like garages, face the street, got to have certain things. Pick at least one of these, and one of them's like windows on 15% of the garage door, but then you can also have windows on 15% of the front of the property. And so we were talking about what's the right amount, and we were talking about the 35%. It's all coming back to me now. Mm-hmm. And so, well, maybe if you just have that 35% just cover the whole front, that'll necessarily include the garage. That's what I was remembering. And so I was just thinking in light of that kind of concept of allowing for, you got to do a bunch of things, but you have the whole front of the house to kind of do it. As long as you meet certain things, I agree, like the 60% on the drive or the garage frontage, and there's certain things like that, but otherwise allow a little bit more flexibility in that. I think that's what I had in mind. I was looking at this.
That's what I remember from our last conversation as well, was that we were just going to say, if you looked at the entire frontage, every square inch of it, and you had interesting non-sighting in X percentage of it, then it counted, right? And so that could be accomplished in a myriad of ways.
And that's where staff came back and said they couldn't incorporate design elements to accomplish that because how do you measure for paint color scheme? Because at that point they have 100% coverage because they painted their house.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking like if you're talking about windows and doors and trellises and belly bands and all of that stuff's measurable, right? And maybe if you have a second color, boom, that's an extra 5%. Or you have 2 colors, that's 5% extra. If you have 3 colors, that's another 5%. 4 colors, there's another 5%. For every additional color beyond 1, you get 5% credit. I'm just being creative and thinking, trying to think of different ways to accomplish that.
Understood. I think having it as a checkmark option as 2 of the other planes would help not kill staff.
And would
Yeah,
it be
that's fine
possible?
too.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to do these measurements in terms of a count as well, instead of just like a calculation of something like, okay, you accomplished this, that's one thing. You know, if you got 4 colors, that's one. You know, and you come up with percentages that way too.
And that's what we have this check. I
Check,
think
yeah,
that's
the
what.
check system is kind of where that's okay.
Right. And also our site plan for commercial and multifamily, the way that it is a point system, if you have certain elements, like if you have screening as, because I can't remember all of these things. If you have screening and how much screening do you have from the street? Could be from 0 to 8 points. Then, you know, depending on the level of screening, you get assigned 5 points, let's just say, for this particular proposal. And the goal is to obtain like 66 points total for the entire project. So there is a point system also, but that wasn't what was drafted by our consultant in regards to the elements. We can definitely.
Sorry.
I was going to say we could definitely review the point system to say somehow instead of a percentage, possibly assigning certain things points. But
I think I would suggest not going down the points road at this point in time. I think the checklist serves the same general purpose. And certainly if you did a point system, it'd have to be a completely different one than you have in the commercial. And I would worry about, oh, I got 5 paint colors, therefore I'm loading up all my points and I don't have to do any of the hard stuff. And I just feel like that could be something we could evolve to over time if we needed to, but we should start simpler.
Agreed.
I too fully agree on that. And the key is this checklist is supposed to be clear and objective. There should not be any discretion from staff. And that's where I also worry about just looking at the mom and pop that wants to add on to their house and is along street frontage, them calculating the percentage of improvements to meet the design elements. They'll probably have to hire an architect so that they can get exactly what we need in regards to versus a checklist. Do they have this? Check. Do they not have it? Check.
Yeah, I think I agree.
So moving forward, Joy, I think we just need to provide, 2 different options for the residential checklist when we go back to council on September 21st, and they can provide some general direction.
Yes,
And
we
I
can
think
definitely
if you
do
haven't
that.
already done it, Joy, I think it would be interesting to take a couple of recently submitted and or recently approved building permits and take it through this process and show the council and the planning commission, here's what the house looks like on the building permits. Here's what they would have scored, just so they can understand, because I truly don't, I don't understand how big of an issue this might be for changing existing house plans, but I think it would be helpful for you guys to see that and council to see that.
And we had asked to see the Second Street application that had just come through, understanding that I do understand that it's mixed use, but we're all really familiar with that, and it has the look and feel of what one of these townhomes developments might look like. And the bigger picture is the 15%. I know staff sent out an email about what 15% looks like. I
feel like at every work session we've all talked about the percentage should be higher, and yet we've not.
Right.
These work sessions to us.
So I see 2 hands raised, but then I'd also like to circle back to that and ask the commission to look at their email if they can and see the drawing that was done that shows 15.
I do have a slide. So the question I guess I have, in regards to the direction that I received, definitely we're going to provide 2 different checklists. We're also going to provide examples of a recent building permits on how the checklist would hold up in regards to those particular applications. This is the
Can one of
slide.
those, can at least one of those be a single family residential?
Yes, that would definitely be in regards to the building permit. That's typically what we would be applying it to.
Yeah. For your example, a recent single family detached. And then Commissioner Kai has his hand raised. I don't want to move off this if his question's related to that before we go to the 15%.
Thank you, Gene. This was kind of a few discussions, or just the last discussion prior. I think it was, the example was mostly just an example. It was talking about how colors and more colors get you more points or something like that. I just wanted to make the point, and again, I think it was just an example, but I just want to make the point that there too many colors is probably not a good thing. Like if there's the more colors that you have, the more points or credit you get or something, I think is we probably want that to limit at some point. You know, if that somehow makes it into you know what we're talking about, but it was just a point I wanted to make.
Excellent, thank you. And then Miss Julia, you have your hand raised also.
No, I'm sorry. I thought I lowered it. I have to figure that out.
All right. Well, I will ignore the hand raise then. And thank you for the secondary elevation.
All right. So there was a question. There was definitely, we had a definition of what is seen by, you know, from the street. When do we address the facade? When do we require it? And pretty much anywhere that is public right of way was what we determined last time we met. And so I've made the changes based on that as far as in the code. Any facade that is seen from the public right of way or elevation that's seen from a public right of way. So the question came up as far as the secondary elevation. Let's just pretend this is a corner lot. And the front is where the porch is. And so this, based on a 50-foot depth, comes to a 1,100 square feet of area. The roof area doesn't count. So 1,100 square feet, 15% is 165 square feet would be required based on the window standards we currently have. As shown, it's about 83 square feet, and that's 4 windows, 1 little one, 2 large, and 1 or 2 double and 1 single. Ended up being 7.5% as far as towards that total facade square footage. So I'm asking Commission, should we consider lowering the secondary elevation to 5% instead of the required 15%, but of course requiring also additional 5 detailed design elements?
Well, it's not going to have, if it's a side elevation, they're not going to have an entrance. So we need to consider, it's not going to have an entry location. It's not going to have a garage. So I think we need to revisit what the second, what 5, you know, how are they going to do 5 elements with no door, no entrance?
So that's a great question, because I brought that up this afternoon too. And Joy and I kind of like went through the elements, and there are 5 elements that you could do on a side elevation. You could do belly band, you can do painting, you can do shutters. You can
do a dormer.
So you could get to 5, but maybe we want less. I mean, you could get there.
I can't raise my hand, but I have a couple things to say when it's my turn, Gene.
Go for it.
I think there should be a modified checklist for the side elevation that would use the same elements from the front elevation, but we obviously strip out the ones that don't make any sense, and keep the rest and have a different number that maybe you have to hit. I also like the idea of having a different percentage requirement. Like I think the front elevation should have a higher percentage requirement than the side. I think 5's too low. I don't know what the right number is. I think 15's too low for the front. I think 5's too low for the side. We can quibble on the numbers, but I like that concept.
Yeah, and do you have the other, thank you, and do you have the other picture that shows what Councilor Scott had drafted with the 3 different,
I'm sure I do. Let's see here, right here.
there it is. So from a commission standpoint, we're looking at what 15%, and it counts just the door and the window. And then 19%, and then 27%. And so I guess this doesn't count any of the other design elements. It's just literally counting the door itself and the window panes themselves, correct? That's what we're counting towards the 15%.
Yep.
That is correct.
And so from other commissioners, what is your, how do you feel about, it's hard, and it would be better if we, and when we see a real example of a single family detached, it might be helpful to know. But if we just look at one of those, how many people are comfortable with 15% as the only requirement? And are people more comfortable closer to 20%? Looking at that 19% coverage?
I'm closer to the 19.
I like 19 better.
The last one, I mean, is this, judging by the door size, I'm guessing this is a 2-story building, and the last one's basically got windows at your feet and windows at the top of your head.
Yes.
I think that's too much. I don't know how you'd actually do that in real life. So probably the middle seems a little bit more reasonable.
I'd be more comfortable with the middle if the lower story had a matching window on the right side, the way the 27% coverage does.
Mm-hmm.
So if it had 2 smaller lower windows along with that door.
Yeah, I was just trying to get I was just removing and adding from the original picture without resizing windows and so it wasn't exactly like, nothing would actually look like this, right? It was just supposed to illustrate this much coverage is this much percentage. Obviously, it's not a real life house.
Oh, I get it. I'm just thinking because I know it wouldn't actually work out where you'd have them that low or that high, but you'd still have to put them at normal height, and that would basically make the entire upstairs just all the way across would be just a window in order to make that work effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
It seems like a lot.
and I worry again about some of the prescription of this, right? You get, a house that's facing the sun and, this and that, and you put a giant windows on the front, and all of a sudden it becomes not a very useful place to live. So I worry about being overly prescriptive on this. And remember, the incentive, I know that people want to do it, get as much money as they want for the places, but it feels like we're going to hamstring people if we do more than about what looks like about the 19%, or because I think that, again, we can be modest in our asks and even be a little bit on the high side. But if we start being you've got to cover a quarter of your front with windows, it feels like we're hamstringing a little bit. But I'm just going from gut instinct on that.
So if we did 20% on the front and 10% on the side, and we can get an example of that.
And for side, we're talking about sides that you public can see, right?
Correct.
We're talking about the corner lot stuff. Okay.
The corner lot stuff, and the example that Joy had where it was showing 7.5%, that was a little lean, but then when we add a couple of other elements, it's probably going to be still kind of blank. So if we change it to 10% with a couple of design details, we're probably about where we need to be, and we're not overwhelming. Because like we heard in the open house is that sometimes these street facing sides, you don't want, first off, you got energy efficiency that's out, that you got to take into consideration. And if, you're on the side, you got cars going by you, you're going to have a lot of visibility. So having 10% on the side and 20% on the front seems more appropriate.
So I do want to just remind everyone that the standard that we're proposing, definitely the 15% is consistent with like the cities of Lake Oswego and Canby. Even City of Tualatin requires at least 12% of the wall plane. City of Wilsonville is 10 to 15 with additional design elements. And Washington County is requiring equaling or exceeding 10%.
Do they count the door?
I cannot tell you that just because I can't remember when I pulled these percentages.
Let's double check that because if they're not counting the door, then 15% not counting the door is different than us at 20%. Right. Yeah.
I'd also say what's more important than what is actually in the code of all these other cities is what is actually being built in houses that we think are good for our community, right? Like, yeah, I feel like when I go down any neighborhood built in Sherwood in the last 20 years and I look at the front of a house, it's way more than 15%, right? Like they're exceeding that number by a long. So we could say 15%, but then we might end up getting a much different experience than what our current community has. And I feel like we should base the percentage on actual houses and not some other city's code that might be 30 years old.
But this is a minimum though, right? We're legislating a minimum. And,
right.
And that's one thing that was occurring to me as we're talking about this. I mean, I mean, I was just thinking about like the middle one. Yeah, that's what I like best, but the people building these things should know what the market likes best. I mean, they'd probably build it that way. We just need to legislate a minimum that it can't be worse than something or other. So I know you know.
A lot of times they'll just go to what's the cheapest. So there's.
Yeah, but it has to sell too. So, you know. But although these days, I mean, people are scrambling for housing. So
that's just it. I think like as things get harder, you know, either more competitive, there's people will give up less and less just to you know. So it's like if you have the choice between something that looks better and not, but you know.
But you're in the Sherwood School District with the Sherwood Parks.
Right.
Yeah. You're like, well, I can add a window or something like that, or you know, but
yeah. So a safe minimum is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right.
Did you want to give that number to us today?
Yeah. I think it's 16.28% is exactly what we're looking for.
Great.
I like
a third decimal. Yeah, I mean the 19 makes sense to me there, but because I don't know. I mean, if you went to 20, it would have to be at least that with something more, and where else would you put it? I mean, you pretty much box somebody into has to be a certain way every time.
A symmetrical small window on the lower level.
I don't think looking at it, this particular house as the way to like figure out where you would add something else is very instructive. I think we need to look at real houses.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I agree. But I think it probably is somewhere in the 15 to 20, maybe up to 25% range, maybe. But that's where I think it is, somewhere in there.
One other thought about the side versus front checklist idea is you have to somehow accommodate for the scenario where someone on a corner lot builds the garage on the side of the house instead of the front of the house, which certainly happens. So we'll have to figure that out.
I'm on a corner lot and I don't know which side is my front.
The side with your door is the front.
My door faces the corner.
Then it's the side with the driveway.
That's actually not technically true in accordance with our definitions.
Well, then how is it? Is it? Oh, it's your address. It's based on your address.
No, well, it's based on whatever the longest side is. The longest lot.
Okay, because I'm also on a corner. It's actually a very rounded corner, and my front door also faces directly to the corner. So
yours is the same street, all like on both sides.
well, yeah, because it's not actually a corner. It's a
Right.
Well, it's the argument that the lady made on why her fence was not, why she wasn't on a corner lot. She has the same deal, but anyway, that's a conversation for another day.
Side with your front door. Let me help you out here, man.
No.
That's funny.
Okay, so we'll come back with some real life examples of what we're seeing in Sherwood. We'll pull some house elevations and work up the analysis for you. And also present it to council so they know what's currently being built in Sherwood.
Okay, and before you leave the checklist, there's one other comment that I had on the housing plan variety. I think 1 and 2 should be the same because we're not distinguishing between a townhome block and another block. I would say sentence 1, no two directly adjacent or opposite buildings, residential buildings, in a development of more than 3 units may have the same front or street facing facade. And then keep A and B underneath it, but because you're only identifying single family detached instead of the quad. So I think, again, the statement would be no two directly adjacent or opposite residential buildings in a development of more than 3 or 4 units, whatever you want it to be, may have the same front or street facing facade. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
And then we had asked about, did you go to Josh about removing the word family and then defining family in our code as a group of people within a single dwelling unit?
So I did pose that question to Josh and I just haven't heard back from him yet. So I'm just waiting on the answer. But that is something that we're looking into.
Okay, so that's it.
All right. Let's see if I can get my mouse to move us forward here. So I only have a couple more things, which is awesome. Further discussion in regards to setbacks. I know that the last planning commission, the commission said adjustments are okay and can move forward, but variances should not be allowed. So I'm re-asking the question just because we've identified, well, what about impacts to irregular lots, irregular shaped lots, or lots that could be possibly constrained by environmental issues. So what I did do was create a graphic or a table that I basically identified what the current zoning setback requirements are for the particular zones and what a 20% variance would be and a 10% adjustment would be. And these are all in feet. So a variance, a 20% variance for 20-foot front yard required, like on a low density residential zone, would be 4 feet. For a medium density or high density residential, which requires 14 feet of front yard, that would be 2.8% or 2.8 feet would be the request for a variance. While an adjustment would be 2 feet from that for 20 feet and 1.4 feet for a 14-foot front yard, as an example. I'm just asking the commission to see if that is that we're just moving forward with adjustments, but not allowing variances.
I would agree that a variance would need to be through a PUD because the face of a garage being reduced by 20% means that your driveway is only 16 feet long, and that is not long enough for an SUV, just a standard size vehicle. And so at that point, people are parking on the sidewalk. I think that's my biggest angst. Rear yard setbacks, I think we are impeding people's quality of life that have expectations that if they bought with a rear yard of 20 feet and then their neighbors is that close with, you know, the opportunity to have porches and decks. I believe you can do porches and decks in the setbacks, correct?
Yes, depending on,
Right. So at 20 feet minus 4 feet with a 10 or 15-foot deck, you've got someone on their deck at the back fence. Not that you couldn't have people at your fence all the time, but I think that just creates you know, and not that 4 feet ends the world. It ends the world in the front because you don't have parking, but it just it's bothersome. Councilor Scott, you have your hand raised. And welcome.
Yeah, my recollection at the, I'm not driving anymore. My recollection at the last meeting was that I thought we had general consensus to change these variance amounts from 20 and 10 to 10 and 5%. But maybe I'm misremembering.
I remember that as part of one of the discussions, and then I don't know if the variance not allowed, is that a council comment?
Yeah, it was the mayor comment. I don't think anyone else on council necessarily jumped to agree with it. It was just, he felt very strongly that we should severely limit variances. I don't know that a plurality of council agrees with him. I think after we talked about this for like half an hour at our work session 2 weeks ago. And I thought amongst those of us here in planning commission and myself that we had all kind of generally aligned around not going as far as saying no variances, but to change the current 20% and 10% in code to 10% and 5%, which I think was your idea, Chair Simpson. And I thought the rest of us on the call nodded our agreement to it. So it's interesting to see it back.
okay, so I think if anything, it's staff clarification just to make sure that I'm capturing exactly the direction that the Planning Commission would like. I do remember there was conversation in regards to changing the percentages, but I didn't get the understanding that was the direction that we were moving towards. And the last thing I heard was adjustments are okay, which, you know, we accidentally or erroneously identified them as exceptions. Adjustments are okay, but variances, I thought I had the understanding that you guys were not okay with moving forward with those. And so just let me know.
So any of the other commissioners have comment from our last meeting? Because I'd be happy to go to 5 and 10 and let that be a quick council slide presentation when they get presented with the two options for the checklist.
I think I was gone during the prior discussion of this, but I support that, what you just suggested, Chair Simpson.
Commissioners Giles or Bance, do you have any other recollection or direction?
Yeah, I think your point about making the driveways, you know, functionally not useful is, you know, is something that we gotta watch for. So I would accept your recommendation as well.
Okay.
Yeah, no further comment. Me.
All right. So thank you. Definitely, I heard the 5 to 10% option instead of the 20 and 10, and to move that forward to City Council.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, yes, and council may say no, they don't want variances, but that's for them to make that.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I think this is the last question that I have for you guys tonight. It has to do with public pedestrian paths, I think it was Commissioner Bance that identified it before. If we should require the same design elements as in public right-of-ways, the facades that are seen from the public right-of-ways. And again, typically these are not public right-of-ways. That's why it wasn't easily categorized, just because usually they are public access easements that are in between property lines. So the question is, these public access ways that typically connects one neighborhood to the next or one street to the next, should they be, should we require the same type of elevation requirements, design standards that we do for the ones that are seen from public right of way?
I just in my initial reaction to that, I believe that we should. I've noticed there is a wide variety in how pedestrian paths exist in Sherwood. There's some that function very well and others not so much. And kind of what comes to my mind is their potential handicap accessibility. And so for that reason alone, I think there should be, there should be a consistent standard in how they exist.
So we're not identifying the ADA standards that's tied to constructing the pedestrian access easement. We're very specifically identifying the two houses that are in between, the facades that face that particular access way, to see if we would require the same design elements as you would if they were fronting a public right-of-way.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Why? I think maybe, I mean, we were just talking about the side of houses for corner lots. I think that seems reasonable to me. Whatever we decide for those, maybe for this as well.
Okay.
I mean, because you have sidewalks and stuff. I mean, it's kind of like this.
Okay, so requiring it as the same secondary facade.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could complicate it more, but it just seems like it's similar enough kind of thing, you know, to me to just make them the same.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm for simpler, and it's certainly defensible, right? The difference between a sidewalk and a public pedestrian path is, to the general public, I don't know that it's super differential.
Excellent.
A distinction without a difference.
Yep.
I think it's also easier now that we're reducing window coverage on those sides, so that there will be an ability for someone to position their windows up and away from the actual path a little bit better.
Okay, great, excellent. Thank you for that direction. That helps me so that we can definitely modify the standards to reflect that. So, hey, my last slide, which is awesome. So, unfortunately, City Council work session had to be moved. So it's not the next one, but it's going to be September 21st instead. All of the recommendations that you guys have provided us tonight will bring forward to them, in addition to the landscaping percentage that we were talking about, where you suggested or recommended applying it only to the front yard. And not the entire lot, based on the entire lot. We're going to bring back again setbacks as far as the variances, and showing them also the new garage and off-street parking area standards that we placed in the design code, or in the code, which some specific design elements tied to that. And all the other things that were not on your plate, as far as on-site swales, roadway width to allow parking on both sides of the street, amending the code to allow for self-appeal to City Council. So that's what's on the table for City Council on September 21st. We're also at this time projecting Robin Hood Festival still continuing. We have not heard if that isn't happening. Oops. And Planning Commission hearings October 26th is when the first hearing is projected, along with November 9th, if needed. Jean, for your schedule. And then City Council hearings would be December 7th and December 21st. That is all that I have tonight, and can answer any questions or take any feedbacks you guys might have for me.
Depending on how things go, I may not be at the October 26th hearing.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well,
Commissioner Kai?
Was that the optional one?
No, it wasn't. And what's the draft comprehensive plan, you also indicated that hearing would be in October also?
oh, Erica. Oh,
Erica, you
She's looking at the calendar on my wall right now.
I know. I'm looking. I'm looking at the calendar, and the calendar is very busy, so I'm trying to decipher when we had it.
And my handwriting, so that's the other downside to her finding it easily.
So it looks like we have the comp plan scheduled maybe for its first hearing on October 12th. Now, October 12th, that is a tentatively busy planning commission meeting that night. We have a tentative public hearing scheduled. So we are looking at maybe a public hearing for a new site development, and then 2 public hearings for, the comp plan and residential design standards. Or wait, no, sorry, residential design standard is moved to the 26th. So we're good. We're good. So comp plan, first hearing with the commission on October 12th.
okay.
Busy.
And are we through with our work sessions on the comprehensive plan? Are we all up to speed, and there haven't been any significant changes for us to have to look at anything between now and then?
Correct. So there haven't been any significant changes. City Council is reviewing the document on September 7th at their next work session. And so if City Council has any significant changes that they want Planning Commission to review, we'll definitely bring the document back to you with their suggested edits to get your feedback.
So that would be at our next meeting. We would get a heads up at that point.
Correct. So that would be on September 14th.
So at the September 14th meeting, do we have another hearing? So our next meeting is September 14th, isn't it?
Yes. So our next meeting is September 14th, and it looks like we have a public hearing scheduled that night for a new site development, and I'll be sending out the calendar tomorrow with all these dates, and then we'll have a work session on the updated EOA.
And that same night.
Correct.
And then
the work session on the updated EOA should be fairly quick, because all we're doing is just updating the numbers in that document based on what's currently happening in Sherwood.
And the 28th, is there a hearing on that night?
On September 28th, we tentatively have scheduled the EOA for that night.
That might be the other meeting night that I miss. I'm going to miss 1 or 2 of those, so
EOA.
I may not have a choice on which one I miss, so.
I only agree to be
EOA is our economic opportunities analysis.
I see.
And that's just a recommendation to council on a document that has already been through the planning commission a couple of times, 2 or 3 years ago, and then a couple of times now. So like you said, it should be an easy work session because we've seen it many times before. All right.
I probably will not be able to attend on October 12th. Fortunately, we have a vacation that week scheduled.
All right. Does anybody else have any known going to be out of town so we can schedule around that?
We do have a wedding that we'll be attending in October. I need to find the exact dates and I can let Erica know.
Right now, there's a maybe conflict at the end of September for me. It's a trade show, so it may not be happening on that, whatever that 21st.
28th.
Or 28th, that's right. So.
Okay. So other than that, we look pretty good, Erica.
I think so.
Thank you very much. Any other staff announcements or commission announcements?
How goes the search for new commissioners?
We have an advertisement out on Facebook and Nextdoor today. So I am crossing my fingers that, we get a couple bites.
And if you have friends that you want to allow the opportunity to learn a lot more about their community, this is the time to do it. So, because, hey, when's the best time to join? About the time we're going to a hearing that has a 500-page document to hand to someone.
I was totally going to tell him about, how we spent an hour talking about how many maps we want. That's scintillating.
Chair Simpson, you're laughing, but I seem to remember my first meeting, we had 3 or 4 binders or something. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is a lot of reading. She said there's going to be a lot, but anyway.
I do mention that in the interview process. there are times when there's a lot of reading and times when there's not. So, well, guys.
I do mention it. I mention it to people when I talk to them.
Yeah, well, guys and gals, I appreciate all the time. I think this was a very productive work session. And if I'm not able to attend the hearing on the 26th, I would have great confidence that it will be an excellent product that we can forward on to council. So thank you. So.
And if you're not able to attend, I apologize in advance for how poorly run that meeting will be.
Oh, please. Yeah. I really like the in-persons a lot better because staff made me always look smarter because I had a chance to, raise my hand and run off to the side and get help. So anyway.
I'm just sad by how quickly the in-person meetings started again and then stopped again.
I missed the only one.
Me too. So.
This me and Commissioner Widola. So
yeah,
everybody, and actually because everybody else called in for that meeting. Oh. So it was, but we were over at 7:35, I think. Shortest meeting ever. So all right. Well, I don't have anything else. Again, just appreciate all the hard work and everybody put forth to this. Enjoy. Again, you're always last on the agenda, but you're first in the minds of our packets because it's always the thickest part. So.
All right. No, thank you all for your great input. I do appreciate it because it does make my life a little bit easier as we move forward.
All right. Well,
someday we should let Joy go first. I mean, maybe.
When's your birthday, Joy? Maybe that'll be your.
It's in April. So
that's a terrible birthday present.
It's in April.
I know, I'm gonna say we're gonna not let you come to the meeting on your birthday. That's your present.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody. I'm going to call the Planning Commission work session adjourned, and we're all free to finish our evening out. Thank you so much.